to the Mavs Fans for Life podcast. I am Landon Thomas, joined by my co-host Shahnavaz and Makhani. And this episode, we will be talking about Jalen Brunson's return to Dallas. Well, playing this time. And then 2024 Kyrie, the aggressive Kyrie. Does it rival the untucked jersey Kyrie or the finals game winner Kyrie? It's off to a great start. And then also the brutal schedule. Shahnavaz is going to bring up. So Shahnavaz, Jalen Brunson returns to Dallas. He actually returned last year. So we already went through the video montage and just the hurrah of him being in the arena for the first time since, signing with the New York Knicks. But this time he actually played. So it was a different feeling. It was kind of diminished with Luka not playing. You would like to see the back and forth, but it was still a great game. It turned out to be, and
both games were. Even last year's was great too.
Exactly, last year's was great. This year's was great. It seems like this is going to be something that could turn out to be one of those games that you circle that you have to go watch.
Yep.
The Mavericks win that game. And in a close one, Kyrie went off. 44 points, 10 assists. It was incredible game. Brunson had a good game too. He had 30 points. He could have played better. He was definitely frustrated with the calls that were against him and his team. But what was your first reaction to Brunson playing in Dallas? And what was your overall thoughts on the game itself?
I think you could tell there was a little bit of nerves. I don't know if it was. I think anytime you go back to an arena where you were beloved, and especially after the year the Mavs had, going to the conference finals with him.
Yeah,
he was drafted here. We gave him his first shot, so I think there's always nerves. When you go back to play your old team for the first time, and you could kind of see it in the way he played. To your point, he did finish with 30, but that kind of was towards the end of the game. He had a couple late buckets there after the game was pretty much over, I think, after that Josh Green 3, which, by the way, Josh Green, that sandwiched in between, a terrible game, that he had. You look at the Portland game last Friday and then the Knicks game last night, exactly what we wanted to see from him, right? Be aggressive and take your shots. Even though he missed a couple easy looks, he hit that clutch 3-pointer at the end. He played some great defense. I think it looks like he's rounding into form. I think we want to see it when when Luka and Kyrie both are on the floor. That's kind of been the differentiating factor, it seems. But the game as a whole, you said it, this is going to be one of those matchups to watch going forward. There's so many storylines with these two teams. Obviously Brunson coming back to Dallas, Julius Randle grew up in Dallas, in Plano, and he always torches the Mavs. I think he averages like 28 and shoots like 45% from three, which he's like a career 33% 3-point shooter. So he always plays well in front of his hometown, in front of the home crowd. Tim Hardaway Jr. against the Knicks,
he had a great game,
and to me went crazy last night as well, over 30 points. So I think you're always gonna, there's always gonna be that back and forth. J Kidd obviously going up against the team that he played for after he left the Mavs. There's so many different storylines with the Knicks and the Mavericks. So it's always a fun matchup. Look, game started off great. Mavericks were up by 20. It didn't end, defensively particularly well, but, a win is a win, especially after coming off that Memphis loss. This is a game that the Mavericks needed against a team that's got the best defensive rating since 2024 started. So, to be able to outscore them and without three key rotational players, I think that's huge. I think that clearly shows the chemistry of this team. It showed, the resiliency to, even though you gave up a pretty sizable lead, to be able to, to secure the win and without Luka, without Exum, without Lively, and have, all around good games, I think, from Green and even Grant Williams. I think, getting into double figures, and he played some good defense and took some nasty shots to the face. A couple elbows from Julius Randle. I think overall it was a great game, from a lot of the key players that we wanted to see.
Yeah. And first of all, let me just give credit where credit is due. I mean, you mentioned it with Josh Green and Grant Williams. That's the problem, is consistency. That's what we want to see. But they played outstanding um, within their roles, and credit is due. I mean, I pretty much said it. They weren't playing good, and
Yeah.
everyone said it. I mean, you said it. Everyone has been waiting for them to play like this. And if you get them to play like this on a consistent basis, I mean, you're not asking for much. They played outstanding within their role, but that's they were doing, doable things that they can do on a nightly consistent basis. So if you see that from them too, you wouldn't be seeing their names in trade rumors. You wouldn't be seeing frustration online or social media of how they're playing. You would see them like you saw last year with Josh Green, like, oh, he's one of the guys that are going to be here a long time, or with Grant Williams, the way he played at the beginning of the season. Oh, he's one of the best 3-and-D guys in the league. You saw it in Boston. So just the fact that those two are performing like that against a good team
Mm-hmm.
is definitely gives you optimistic vibes about their role within the team moving forward. But going back to Jalen Brunson, um, you know, uh, I've said it before, so it's on record. I love the fact that he got paid. I was a proponent of him being paid, whether it's in Dallas or somewhere else. He got the bag, which he deserved. He needed that bag because his play, earned it. He's a great player. He should be an all-star this season. And for what he's doing on the court, it's good to see him play like he did in the playoffs. Um, hopefully he can hopefully he can push it even more instead of being on the borderline. We mentioned it last week with the guards in the East. Hopefully he can be a for sure all-star, a perennial all-star. Go to the next level. But he's not Kyrie. That's what I'm boiling it down to. He is not Kyrie. I've said this before, and I don't get it. I mean, I love the fact that he got paid and he's doing great things, and he got what he wanted. He wanted to lead a team, be the primary ball handler and be around his family. I mean, the coach is a family friend. His dad is on the bench as a coach. His godfather is in the front office. I mean, there's a lot of family ties to the Knicks, and he's happy. He wants to be there, and Kyrie wants to be in Dallas. And they also got Derek Lively out of Brunson going to New York. So I think it's a win-win for both. And I think the Mavericks got the better stick of the whole ordeal. Obviously, last year was horrible. But when you look at the holistic view of what the Mavericks did, they got Kyrie, who's only 4.5 years older than Brunson, and you think, oh, that's what, from 3 or 4 years in the NBA. Okay, but Kyrie is going to put up the same stats next to Luka as Jalen Brunson is putting up the stats with New York, leading the team. And then you have a 19-year-old Derek Lively. So age doesn't really matter because Derek Lively is like 4 years, 5 years younger than Luka.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you take into account last year and you kind of have to, throw it away, basically. I mean, it's hard to integrate a new player like Kyrie, who's been a star, for over a decade in this league. And it's hard to integrate somebody like that with Luka and with a bunch of new moving parts, pretty
Yeah,
much.
you see the Suns. I mean,
Yeah.
it
I mean,
takes
look,
time.
the struggles they've had. I mean, I think, and I've said this before, I think, good for Brunson. I mean, I'm in agreement with you, right? Like it's great that he got paid, whether it was with Dallas, whether it was with New York, whether it was with any other team. I know there was rumors that he was going to go to the Heat at the time.
Yeah.
Regardless of who it was, I mean, I think once the Knicks hired his dad on the staff like a year in advance,
Yeah.
the writing was kind of on the wall at that point, and
Yeah.
for all people want to say about, oh, well, we could have, we should have given him that extra year in the contract. I mean, that's hindsight's 2020 at this point, right? If you're Donnie Nelson, you look back at it. I mean, it's a second round pick. that you didn't give him the right contract. Okay, it happens. It's a mistake. Well, Donnie Nelson's not the GM anymore of the Mavericks. So,
Yeah.
all these people faulting the front office. I mean, this isn't on Nico. This isn't on Jay Kidd. Carlisle and Donnie Nelson were the ones who were running the show at that point. So,
Yeah.
I think the discourse there is a little frustrating sometimes. When you look, to your point, on social media and you hear he's, oh, we could have kept Brunson. I would rather have Kyrie and Derek Lively, the second in a heartbeat over Jalen Brunson right now.
So yeah, well, not just Brunson. Would you rather have Kyrie Irving, Derek Lively, and okay, I mean it was part of the trade. Markieff Morris, those three over Jalen Brunson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Spencer Dinwiddie, and those picks.
Yeah, I would 100% have Kyrie and Lively and Derek Jones Jr. and Omax. You talk about all these guys that the Mavs needed a shakeup, right? Like this isn't, had you brought back that same Western Conference team, the same issues would have persisted, right?
Yeah.
The Mavericks would still struggle rebounding. They would still struggle with interior paint defense, and we'd be hearing the same complaints of, why is Dwight Powell starting every game? Why is Maxey starting every game? Because the Mavericks wouldn't have been able to go out and get a guy like a Derek Lively Jr. Like what other centers on the market would the Mavericks have been able to go out and get? Like they wouldn't be able to afford any of these big guys, So you have to look at it from that perspective as well. And I think the other thing, what I was going to say earlier was, you look at Kyrie Irving's career, and I think it's really hard to play next to a guy like Luka, who has the ball in his hands that much, and we talked about this offline, but his Luka's usage rate is down to the lowest it's been in 3 years, but still demands the ball a lot, and he still has the ball in his hands a lot. So it's hard to play next to a guy like that, especially when you're a young guy like Jalen Brunson, who's trying to make it on your own in the NBA. You want that kind of taste of, hey, I want to be the lead dog and I want to see what I can do on my own. And he absolutely deserves that right. Kyrie Irving's been there. Kyrie Irving's been the guy, right, in Boston with a young team. He's been the guy in Brooklyn, recruiting guys like Kevin Durant and James Harden. His best basketball that he played in his career was playing secondary to LeBron James. So the fact that Kyrie can come in here as an older vet, understands his role, doesn't need to be the flashy guy, doesn't need to be the guy that, has to take over every game, but can do it like we saw last night, when Luka's out or when Luka's having a bad game. That's the perfect fit next to Luka Doncic, is a guy that understands this is Luka's show, but when he needs me, I'm going to be there.
Yeah, and it really boils down to Kyrie is flexible. He actually wants to be here, and it doesn't matter if he's having 40 points or 20 points. He just wants to win, and that's the key. You mentioned it. I mean, Jalen Brunson wants to win as well, but he wants to be the primary ball handler, and then you throw in the family aspect. I mean, I honestly think that his dad was going to be the coach regardless. I mean, he was the assistant coach in Minnesota with Tibbs, and then there were some legal things going on, so he took some time off, and then he came right back, and then Brunson's there. I mean, it was a pawn in the puzzle of bringing Brunson, but the family friend ties were already there. So I honestly, I've said it online. I honestly think he was going to be in New York regardless. I mean, either 3 years from now or 4 years from now, or 3 or 4 years from when he signed, or via a trade somehow. Like, he was going to be there regardless. He wanted to be in New York. That's the thing. Like, you can blame the front office on how they did the contract. You can blame anybody, Mark Cuban. You can blame anyone, but he was going to be in New York. And shout out to Kidd. He gave Brunson a chance. Carlisle didn't use Brunson like Kidd did. Carlisle used Brunson as a backup, the backup point guard to Luka. And Kidd said, hey, we can have two ball handlers. Let me make Brunson, my shooting guard. Even though he's smaller, but let me put him in the starting lineup. to bump his minutes up and give him a chance. And it worked out. I
And
mean, we saw it.
and let's not forget, if Tim Hardaway Jr. doesn't get injured that year, Jalen Brunson's not in the starting lineup. Like Hardaway Jr. had that
Yeah, that's true.
shooting guard spot locked down.
Yeah. But he
Brunson
was
was
still playing a lot of minutes.
yeah, and I don't know if he would have still been a six man or if he would have showcased a little
True.
bit more to be put in the starting lineup. But there's so many things you can look back on. Who's to say that if the Mavericks hadn't signed him and things didn't work out the year after, they don't. Jalen Brunson could have been the centerpiece for that Kyrie deal instead of Spencer Dinwiddie, right?
Yeah.
Like if all things were equal. Let's not forget the Mavericks almost traded Jalen Brunson on draft night for Tyrese Halliburton. Like that's been a well documented report. So it's not like
Hmm.
Jalen Brunson was this untouchable piece that the Mavericks messed up. Like there were conversations about him being on the move anyway before that deal, and I
Yeah.
think not trading him for for assets at the deadline, you can look back on that and say it was a bad move. But hey, the team got to the conference finals by not trading him. So it's like take your pick your poison on what whatever you want. But if you look at things now, I think both teams are in a better spot. The Knicks obviously are playing very well with Jalen Brunson. Tibbs is getting the best out of him, and I think having like you said, his dad and Leon Rose, kind of in the building guys he's grown up with his whole life. I think that helps. And then obviously Kyrie, I think is in a place where he finally, for the first time in ages, seems happy and seems at peace.
Yep. And he said it. He doesn't just seem like it. He said it. I mean, he said he wanted to be at a place where he can finally call home
Yep.
in the NBA, somewhere he can be himself. That's the thing. Like he left Nike. He moved with Anta so he can create his destiny. He can control what he puts out there. He has creative control, and that's what he did with his NBA team. He chose a team that gave him some sort of identity to be himself, instead of just looked at as, oh, you're just a basketball player. Like the Mavericks actually see him as a person. And that's the biggest thing, and that's what he wanted. I mean, the kid dynamic is there. I mean, obviously, kid can be a better coach. There's so many things that he can do better as a coach. But when you look at the dynamic, and I that's why I always preach is look at the good and the bad. Because there's sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, kid is doing horrible, and then just like Grant and Green, when he's doing great, you got to praise it. And I think that's the thing that people don't look at with kid is Luka and Kyrie want him to be here. They want him as the coach. Dirk Nowitzki wanted him as the coach. All Mark Cuban, Nico Harrison wanted him as the coach. And you see the dynamic with him and Kyrie. It's really beautiful because that is his mentor. That is him, Rod Strickland, his godfather, his dad, and then the late Kobe Bryant. He mentioned those guys as his mentors, and that was his idol growing up in New Jersey, watching the Nets, watching kid, terrorize the whole league, dominate the whole league, and do his thing. And that's what every night, just like we watch Luka play and Kyrie play. Kyrie was watching Jason Kidd play every night and do those magical things. So there's just so many dynamics that lead to Kyrie being here in Dallas. And there's so many dynamics that lead to Brunson being in New York that you just mentioned. I mean, it really works out for both of them. And I think the beauty of it is both the Mavericks and the Knicks are winning.
Yep.
That's really key is they have similar records. They're
Yeah.
both winning. So I think it's good for Brunson to do his thing in New York, and it's good for Kyrie to do and Lively to be here. Like you said, it's basketball. Things happen. I feel like we should just there's a way to look at the past. You also have to have the vision of both sides because hindsight is always 2020. But like you mentioned, Kid really pushed Brunson to be the best player he can be. And then Hardaway gets hurt. And that pushes Brunson even more to be the player he is now, especially with the playoff run. So the years prior, he wasn't that player. So That's the beauty of basketball. He used his contract year to push himself to be the player he is now. So I give him props, and I hope he does well. He is doing well. I hope he continues to be well and be the best player he can be in New York.
Yeah, I don't. There's no ill will. I mean, it. Like you said, stuff happens in basketball, right? I mean, he gave us some great years, got us to the conference finals. I applaud him for getting his money. It's the same way we think about Dorian, right? Like we're
Yeah.
always going to cheer for Dorian Finney-Smith because of what he brought to this team, and I think we
And the
should.
arena applauded him.
Yeah, and
So
exactly, and you saw the love that he gave after the game. Even in a loss to guys like Maxey and Dwight and Luca and him, were we're kind of joking around after the game. So I don't think there's any ill will even from the players. They understand this is a business, and people are going to do what's best for them.
yeah, and I'm glad he's in the East.
Yeah, thank you.
You know what? Any more great guards in the West? Keep going to the East. Just keep going to the East. Okay, so we kind of talked about it a little bit, but let's just move to the 2024 version of Kyrie Irving. I mean, the brother is on a tear. Like he is balling right now. He came back from the heel contusion and he hasn't looked back. He's actually putting the NBA on the heels because he is averaging 29.8 points, 7.8 rebounds, and 5.5 assists in 6 games since he's been back from his injury. And not only just the stats alone, but the shooting percentages. He's averaging 51.2% from the field, 53.5 from 3-point range, and then also 85.7 from the free throw line. So Shahnavaz, I mean, that's the 6 games. If you throw out the Jazz game, he's actually even better. He's averaging like 33 points.
Yep.
So Shahnavaz, what's your thoughts on Kyrie in 2024? Because like after he said he needs to stop, after he said he's not passive, he said he needs to be aggressive for this team. He has no more excuses. He has to get this team on a hot start with and without Luka in the lineup. So, what's your thoughts on the new version, the new year of Kyrie?
I mean, it's vintage Kyrie. Like that's,
Yeah.
I think that, I had a friend who was at the game last night and texted me and said, "Wait, is Luca out tonight?" And I was like, "Don't worry, you're going to get a vintage Kyrie game tonight." And exactly what we got. He scored the first 8 points against the Knicks. He set the tone, and it doesn't, that's the best thing is it doesn't have to be all Luca. Like that's what we've asked for the last 5 years is we need somebody to take that burden off of Luca. And Luca's, a dominant player. He's going to get his 30 a game, like regardless, and he's going to make it look easy. But to have a guy like Kyrie next to him who can take the pressure off of him, and really put up stats that a secondary, even a lead superstar should be putting up. Like the last 5 games, like you said, he's averaging 33. That's number one option numbers, and he's doing it as a secondary guy. Luka was out for, the one game against Portland and obviously the game against the Knicks, but even against the Timberwolves, he put up 35, and that was a huge victory for the Mavs. So you're getting to see vintage Kyrie. And I love the fact that, his comments about not being passive and being more aggressive, because he's kind of the tone setter for the rest of the team when it comes to pushing the pace, and getting out in transition. And that was, we heard it a lot coming into the season of, we want to be faster. We heard Jason Kidd going to Luke and saying, we want to play faster. It's going to reduce, wear and tear on your body. It's going to kind of, it's going to let us score easy. The easiest buckets to get outside of free throws are in transition, right? And the Mavericks, I think, are still 8th in pace. They've kind of been stuck there after last year. They were like bottom 5. So now you're not having to go half court offense, get set, figure out who's going to set a screen or who's going to set a pick for Luka and have him drive in. You're seeing them run up the floor and make some quick passes. Even some of the quick shots that they're taking, like, they may miss some of them, but like, I feel like that's where Tim Hardaway Jr. has been an advantage. Kyrie's very good at that pull up, transition 3. We've even seen Luka hit a couple of those as well. So I think you're starting to see, especially in 2024, that that kind of piece of it. Now that Kyrie's back and it looks like he's fully healthy again, you're starting to see the Mavericks really get back into being more of an aggressive and fast paced team, which has worked out quite well, this year. So I'm super excited. I know there was a couple, with a bad loss, in there, obviously, the other night to Memphis, but you know, every games like that happen. I mean, we saw what happened with the Lakers last night getting blown out by the Suns, the Celtics getting dismantled by the Bucks. I mean, it's the NBA. Games like that happen. And Memphis was coming off the John Moran injury news. They kind of rallied around each other, and it is what it is. But you come out the next night and you beat a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference. I mean, that shows the resiliency of the team, and that was led by Kyrie.
Yeah, and Kyrie said that. He said it's the NBA. Things happen like that. You're not going to get the same for 82 game season, but he also said it's how you bounce back, and that's the key, is how you bounce back from those situations. And I think that's really the key to the Mavs seasons is, after a loss, you really see them bounce back and lock in. And I think that will help them down the road, because it is an 82 game season and it is very long. But I think you're starting to see why they brought him here. And I mentioned it with Brunson. It's like Kyrie is the best person you can get after losing Brunson. And you're seeing Brunson's stats with New York, but Kyrie's putting up those same stats next to Luka. And that's Kyrie's the person that Luka was like, hey, I'm gonna give up some of my usage for him. And you mentioned like they're pushing up the pace, and and Kyrie brings up the ball not half the time, but probably 40% of the time, and that's good to see next to Luka. It's a change in dynamic, and that's the key, because when Kyrie and Luka is on the floor together, you can't double both of them. So right. It's lethal. I mean, it really is, because you saw it last year when they played together. They were doing the same thing, but they didn't have the pieces around them. Now they have defenders around them. Now they have Derek Jones. Now they have Dante Exum. Josh Green's inconsistent, but when he's on, he's really good. And just the same thing with Grant Williams, Derek Lively, and eventually Omax Prosper. It's going to be nice when they have defenders around them who can, play off of them while those two are cooking. Because when those two are on, it's really dangerous, dangerous to see.
And he gets everyone else involved, and
he does.
You've seen the encouragement he's given to guys like Grant, to Josh Green, some of the guys that have been inconsistent this year. I mean, we've seen the encouragement he's given. Even Jaden Hardy, I feel like Jaden Hardy with Kyrie on the floor as well. So you love to see it. I mean, it seems like a perfect fit here.
And you just brought up a great point, because Jaden Hardy talked about Kyrie, the influence that Kyrie has. He's teaching, Josh Green, Tim Hardaway Jr., they said that he teaches on the court, he teaches off the court. Yeah, he's a great teammate, and he just wants to win. And that's the thing that you see is not just him playing for the team, but he's also playing for his teammates.
Yep.
It's the beauty of him. You wish the national media, we always say, wish the national media would say it, because they kind of gone rogue. I'm calling out the national media, because the last few years they always get on Kyrie. But this season has been beautiful to watch with Kyrie, and you don't hear a darn thing about him.
No talk. Nope.
No talk at all. They just go on to the next issue.
Yep. Phoenix, what's wrong with the Lakers? That's it.
What's wrong with the Warriors? I mean, they just go on to the next issue. But you would love to see more stories about the beauty of Kyrie's season in Dallas. It's just because it's only going to get better. Just the trend that he's on right now, he's on his way to a 50-40-90 season. That's how good he's playing. Obviously, he's played 23 games, but we just mentioned the shooting splits for 2024. So when you look at the season, he's shooting 48.3 from the field, 42.6 from beyond the arc, and 88.9 from free throw range. So if he continues this aggressive Kyrie, the hot start Kyrie that he's not only talked about, but he's shown in the last 5 games, really, he could probably get a 50, 40, 90 season, and he could probably be averaging around 27 points per game.
Yep. Which would be, I mean, what more can you ask for at that point?
Which is his stats last season with the Mavericks.
Yep.
But obviously, you mentioned it. It takes time, and they didn't have the pieces around them. But that's pretty great. That's why I don't think age matters at all when it comes to basketball. I mean, you're still seeing LeBron and Kyrie. I mean, you're still seeing LeBron and KD and Curry. I mean, you could see Kyrie play this way for at least 6 more years if he wants to.
Yeah. It's a new, kind of a new age of basketball. Players take better care of themselves, and medicine's a lot better, and athletic training, the training staffs are a lot better. So, longevity of players is enhanced just based on those factors alone.
In his playing style, it will be the key for longevity, because he's not. He obviously is athletic, but he doesn't use athleticism as his playing style. He uses it to uplift his playing style, which is skill based.
Yep.
Okay, so Shahnavaz, our last topic. We go from good news to bad news. You wanted to bring up the schedule. What do you have for the Mavs?
Oh boy, it's I haven't looked this up exactly, but I'm pretty sure the Mavs have the hardest schedule in the NBA in January. I mean, I'm just looking at the next few games. Obviously, there's 2 home games against the Pelicans. Tomorrow night,
which is bad. It's tough. They're at the same level.
Yep, and they've been playing really, really well. They're right above. They're half game ahead of the Mavs right now in the standings. It'll be interesting to see what the injury report looks like. It's going to get guys like Lively and Exum and Kleba and Luka back.
Yep.
I would presume Luka would be back, but with the others, who knows? Then next week, the Mavericks travel to LA to play the Lakers, which, as bad as the Lakers have been playing, that's always a tough matchup in LA. Against LeBron and AD. Then the Mavericks go to Golden State, which, again, as bad as Golden State's playing, they can catch fire at any time.
And Draymond could be back.
Draymond could be back by then. You always have to go. You always have to be worried about Steph and some of their younger players. Then it gets a little tougher. The Mavericks then have a home game against Boston. Then you got to play Phoenix, another game late in January. This one's going to be at home. Mavericks go on the road to play Atlanta. Then you've got Sacramento. You've got Orlando, who's played really well. And then to end the month, you're in Minnesota to play the Timberwolves again.
Oh my gosh!
Really, the only game I see in there that's like you can probably say, all right, I can more than 60% say the Mavs win is that Atlanta game. Everything else is
they could get hot. I mean, with Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, and DeJounte, I mean, they could get hot too.
And the reason why I think this is a really critical stretch for the Mavs, if you look at the standings, I mean, the Pelicans are half a game ahead. The Kings are a game ahead. The Suns are only 2.5 behind. So, a lot of the Western Conference is really jumbled up, after the first and second seed, you're like 2.5 games out of like third place, and Pelican schedule is not as brutal as the Mavs. I mean, they've got to play the Thunder, the Bucks, and the Celtics, but then they play the Rockets, the Spurs, the Raptors, so these next 2 games, especially if they can split against the Pelicans, and then, who knows when you gotta go to California and play LA, Golden State, and Boston. That's a rough 3-game stretch.
Yeah. I mean, when you were listening, my mind just went brutal. just brutal. You want to be like 2K, just sim through it all.
Sim through and pray for the best.
Hope for the best, yeah. If they could just split obviously the goal is 500 with that schedule. I mean, that should be the goal. It's split those.
It's absolutely,
that is brutal. Yes.
And then you go into February and things, I would say even leading into February, because then you got after the Timberwolves game, you got the Bucks and the Sixers back to back.
Oh, geez.
And then, after that, it gets a little bit easier. You got the Wizards, the Spurs, the Raptors. So things get a little bit easier in middle February, but then we get into March and it gets back to being brutal. So this is going to be a tough stretch for the Mavs right here.
It really is, and all it boils down to is Mavs need to be healthy.
Yep.
They need to get all their players back, and then see what you got with a 2024 Kyrie we just mentioned, and Luka, who's an MVP candidate, and then everyone else. You know, you play your role, make your shots, and defend your butt off, and let's get lively.
There you go.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.